Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to the second class recording, what many people are calling class number 2 or class part 2. Okay, so let's see. We, in the last, so in class, actual IRL class, we took the chance to listen to each other's recordings from the last class. They were really nice. I can't play those for you here, and so we'll just jump right into the next thing I wanted to do here, which was dive a little bit deeper into Max and specifically into sampling. We'll look at how to use the playlist tilde object and how to make some fun things happen there. You will need a big, well, you don't need it, but it might be nice to have the big pack of samples that I prepared to go with this lecture, I guess. And I'll put a link for non-NYU people to download that in the description of this video if you need it. Okay, so playlist tilde. So in Max, we actually have a whole lot of different ways that we can play back sounds. There's maybe too many. We've got play tilde, we've got index tilde, we've got groove tilde, we've got wave tilde, we've got 2D.wave tilde. But we actually aren't going to talk about any of these today. Instead, we're going to stick with a simpler and more direct way to play back sound files called playlist tilde. Now, playlist tilde is like some of the other UI objects that we looked at. It's a it's a UI object, so you can make a new object box and type playlist tilde, and then you'll get a playlist tilde. This is not, however, the way that people typically playlist tilde, not the way that people typically make one of these objects. Typically what you do is you take a sound file, a sample somewhere on your computer, and mine are going to be in Documents, Sound Studio. No, they're going to be in I know where they are. They're going to be in here. So I can grab one of these, for example, I don't know, I'll take one of these loops, and now we can, all you do is drag and drop that into your patch, and you'll get a little playlist object like this that contains the sound file and is ready to play it back. If you try to drag and drop a sound file into your Max patch and it doesn't work, it could be because the patch is locked, and you won't be able to add or change any objects in the patch while the patch is locked. So just unlock it and then come over and drag and drop a sound file in, and you'll see it. So once you've got a playlist tilde in, we can pretty easily play back the contents of this file just by making an easy DAC. Easy DAC. And then connecting it up. So there will be 2 channels on your playlist tilde object, even if it's a monophonic, a 1-channel audio file. If it is, it'll just be the same channel duplicated. And now we can play back. What a fun little beat. I've got the audio gain turned down a little bit here because some of these samples are basically at max volume. You could also throw in a live.gain object, or else even just a gain tilde. Both objects that just do, this is live.gain, and I keep doing the same thing. This is live.gain, and this is gain tilde. Both of these objects just manage audio gain, so essentially let you turn the levels up and down and adjust the volume of any sound that comes through them. So I could take these patch cords, connect them to my live gain. The only thing about live gain is the outlets are very close together, so sometimes it's a little tricky to make sure you've got the left and right channel. See, what did I tell you? But now I should be able to turn the volume back up here, turn the volume down here, press play, and so slowly bring this up. So the playlist tilde object, as you can see, I can start and stop playback just by hitting this play button, but it also responds to messages. So for example, if I send this a 1 message, it's going to start playing back, and if I send it a 0, it will stop playback. If you want to use actually a lot of other cool stuff you can do with this playlist tilde object. For example, we could control the speed of the playback of this file. So if I take a message box and I type into it speed 0.5, we can listen to this sound file playback at half speed. I actually really prefer that one at half speed. That's kind of fun. If you take a sound file like one of these files from the C3 folder, which is just a bunch of different instruments all playing the same C3 note, middle C note, and listen to it. So let's just grab this guitar twang, for example, and give this a listen. If we turn this down and play it at half speed, you'll notice that the pitch drops down by about by exactly an octave. And if we double the speed instead by saying speed 2, again, the perceived pitch goes up by an octave. And this is because if we take a look at one of these sounds in Audacity, it's funny, like Audacity, I remember opening this program in a class a few years ago, and the students were immediately like, no, we will not use this. It looks too old, and we will not be using this old, janky piece of software. But I promise, Audacity is, it's one of those programs that it doesn't promise more than it delivers. It delivers exactly what it promises. Okay, PSA about Audacity over. If you zoom in on one of these sound files, you'll see a bunch of little waves, or a bunch of little, I suppose you could call these waves. I guess the whole thing is one wave, but a lot of cycles of this wave. And there's two kind of things you might notice about this. One is you could look at a given unit of time and count the number of cycles in that unit of time, or you could look at the particular shape of one given cycle. We'll talk a bit more about the shape of this cycle, what that impacts, and some other aspects of the timbre or quality of the sound in a minute. But for now, just know that the pitch of the sound depends on the number of these cycles that you have in a given unit of time. And so if you play the sound back twice as fast, you're playing the same number of cycles in a small unit of time. And if you play back the sound more slowly, you're playing back the same number of cycles in a longer amount of time. That's tied to the perception of pitch, and so that's why the perceived pitch, or the pitch you hear of the sound, changes. The quality of pitch is less obvious when you play back a non-harmonic or a noisy sound like this drum beat playing at half tempo. But for sure, there's a sense that the overall brightness has gone down. Everything seems a bit lower and heavier when you decrease the speed. So this is maybe something we haven't seen before, is controlling a particular aspect of an object's internals by sending it not just a simple number, but a message, a word here, a symbol actually in the vocabulary of Max, followed by a number. And many complex objects, many different properties of that object can be controlled by sending in a message like this. So for example, even an object we've already seen, metro, which as we know, we can change the interval, the time between two events coming out of the metronome, by sending a message into this right inlet here. We could also send it a message like interval, 450 or whatever, and this will change the interval at which the metronome blinks, or at which the metronome sends its bangs, I should say. So if we could do interval 2000, now the interval goes up to 2 seconds. So it's the same functionally as sending a message to this right inlet, but by using a kind of tag, a symbol associated with these arguments, the numbers or the values or whatever it might be that we want to use to change the internals of this object. If you want to know what an object is going to do, or how an object is going to respond to messages, we've already seen that you can option click on an object and look at that object's help file, which of course will tell you a bit about the arguments that object takes and sort of how the object behaves. You can also hold down Control and click on any inlet to an object, and it will show you all the messages that object responds to. Int down here means that the object responds to just numbers, integers. All these other messages means that the object responds to a word, a symbol, followed by some other values that will change the behavior of the object. So knowing this, we can actually change the speed of this playback here dynamically. I could, for example, grab a slider. This blinking is going to drive me crazy. Take this slider, And we could connect that straight to the speed. Of course, the slider by default goes between 0 and 127. 127 times faster than normal speed is going to be very fast. So we might want to change the output of this thing. For that, we use the scale object. Most important object in Max, the scale object. Just do 0 to 127 to be in a different range, maybe like 1 to 6. And now we can connect this up. And rather than connect this to this speed object, I'm going to change this to say speed $1. And now if I hit play, I can use this slider. I can use the slider to change the speed. It's on looping, so we keep hearing it. This dollar syntax, we've seen before that a message box can hold a message. And we've seen that you can use a message box to display a message, to see what's flowing along a patch cord. This other behavior is a kind of way to format messages. It's a formatting syntax, I suppose. So you could say $1, my name is $2. And then if I send this message box a message like, hi, Sam, then it will say, hi, my name is Sam. You send it a message like, hello, Jonathan. Maybe it should say, hello, Jonathan. It will say, hello, my name is Jonathan. And the order of these doesn't matter, so you could change it to be $2, $1, and then it will say, Jonathan, my name is hello. Or $1, hello, my name is hello. You can have multiples, like any order, whatever you like. It's a very, very flexible and convenient way to format and reformat messages to go between objects. So that's what's going on here. And in fact, if we take a message box and connect it here so we can see what's coming out of this speed message box here, you'll see the different speed values coming down and going into the playlist object to control the speed of playback. One thing you might notice is that even though this slider is going between 0 and 127, the output of this message box is simply speed 1 up to speed 6. We've lost all the values between that. No speed 1.5, no speed 2.2, no speed 3.1, no speed 4.7. And without speed 4.7, it feels like, how could we possibly make any music? The reason this is happening is because scale, like many objects in Max, many objects that do math in particular, operates either in floating point or integer mode, depending on how you configure it. So if I take a floating point box like this and I do plus 10, making an object that always adds 10, when I look at the output, even as I increase this, you'll see the number coming out the bottom has lost, it's jumping up by integers. It's lost the precision that comes after the floating point part. Even though a floating point number is going in, the plus 10 object is producing a truncated integer output. If I go to this plus 10 object, though, and add a decimal point after the 10, now the object is in floating point mode, and it will preserve all the precision of the number that comes in. And the scale object is just the same. If you have a decimal point anywhere in the object after one of the numbers, it will be in floating point mode and will preserve all the precision of whatever is coming into it. The floating point number, or rather, even if an integer is coming in, if the computation would generate a floating point number now, that should be handled correctly. So with this, we can play this thing back and listen to a whole range of different speed values. One thing we can do with this that's actually kind of fun is make a very simple sort of sampler. So if I jump over to away from this beat and over to the guitar twang thing here, I said that an octave going up is twice as fast and an octave down would be half as fast. We can actually compute this from the frequency values of the particular MIDI notes that, or rather, not MIDI necessarily, but from the particular pitch values that we want to reproduce. So if I make a K slider, for example, and I throw in a MIDI to frequency object here, or M to F, I can convert these MIDI pitch values into frequency values, number of cycles per second. And if I start to play these, you'll see these values here. That's the number of oscillations per second that a string, for example, vibrating at that frequency would produce. So if I do something like this, I make a speed $1. Now, we can't use this number directly. That's not the actual speed, but we can compute a speed ratio based on a reference pitch. So say, for example, I take C, middle C, to be my reference pitch. That would mean I take this number, 261.6 hertz, the oscillation of middle C. If I divide by 261.6, that will give me a relative speed appropriate to control pitch going into this playlist tilde object. So a relative speed of 1 means don't change the speed. Speed is the same. If I go up to the C above, you can see the value is 2, double speed, exactly what you would expect. I go down an octave, it's half, exactly what we would expect. And if I connect this to a trigger object so that we can both change the pitch and also play the note, then we can build ourselves a very groovy, well, we'll see if it's actually groovy. We can build a sampler in any case. Okay, confirmed. It was in fact groovy. So yeah, this speed value, we can, some very, very simple samplers are even built this way, where you just have one note, and then you shift the pitch of that note up and down by changing its frequency. I'm sorry, changing its playback speed. There is a downside to doing this, and if we take a look at this sound file, we'll notice. Actually, for now, let's listen. Let's try this again with the piano. So I'll grab the piano sound, and then we'll try it with the piano. So that's the sound file playing back at normal speed. So you may notice that the further we get away from that original recording where it's the piano sound playing back at its correct, or at its originally recorded pitch, the less it sounds like a piano, the more it starts to sound kind of strange. The reasons for that are that we're not just shifting the string itself. There's so many other aspects to the piano recording. For example, there's the body of the instrument and the resonant quality of the instrument as the string oscillates. And if we play back the sound file faster, it actually just contracts everything about the recording, including the perception of the size of the piano. You may notice it sounds quite nasal, almost even like a toy piano, as we get into this upper register. And if we look at the piano file in Audacity, you can see, especially near the beginning when we jump into a spectrogram view, that right in the beginning of this piano sound, there's actually quite... So if you have not looked at a spectrogram before, what we're looking at is the energy in the sound at different frequencies over the course of the recording. So low frequency sounds are ones that sound like low notes on the piano. High frequency sounds are closer to high notes. And especially as you get into this upper frequency range, things from like 2,000 to 20,000 hertz, we're dealing less with particular pitches and more with timbral qualities of sounds, the feeling of brightness, cymbals, metal especially is doing a lot of vibrating up in this frequency range. But a quality of harmonic sounds, in things that sound like musical instruments, that sound like they have a pitch, you will always see these bands where the harmonics of the instrument are present. Here in Audacity, the color of the band corresponds to how strongly it is. You can see the biggest band is right here at 261.6 hertz, where we feel the pitch of the sound to be. And then there is another band going up at 261.1, and then 522.2, and so on, doubling that frequency as we go up. However, there is also some energy between these bands. That could be background noise, that could be a number of things. But if you look right at the beginning of the sound, you'll actually see quite a lot of energy between those bands. That's during the portion of the playback of this instrument called the attack. And in the case of a piano, it's literally when the hammer comes up and hits the string and causes it to vibrate. Right when that happens, there are many, many frequencies in the sound that are present that are not going to last very long. They don't resonate in the string, and so they fade away very quickly. And you can see that in general, there are a lot of frequencies that don't last as long as others when they need to vibrate within the string. The frequencies that don't last very long right at the beginning of the sound give the piano its unique kind of character, especially around the attack portion of that sound. And people are really, really sensitive to this. In fact, we can take this recording, and maybe if I just chuck in a fade here, fade in, you'll hear that by fading in, we really change the character of the instrument. I mean, it almost starts to sound like a violin or something when we fade out the attack and take away the character of the piano. I mention all this because when you start to play the sound back at a higher or lower speed, the attack portion really starts to suffer and change, and it's an even more dramatic effect of trying to reproduce instrument played at a particular pitch by simply changing the speed of the instrument played at another pitch. There are other ways to change, and this is why, by the way, high quality instruments, high quality samplers will use many, many samples recorded not only at different pitches but also different velocities, different loudnesses, because those can have different qualities as well. There are other ways to change the speed of a file playing back in playlist tilde, though. Well, there's only one way to change the speed, but you can enable or disable something called time stretch. Now, time stretching uses a specific algorithm to separate the sound into its harmonic and inharmonic components, and uses that to kind of try to be able to separate the speed of the playback from the pitch of playback. So once we enable time stretch, you'll notice that this little trick doesn't work anymore, because now instead of changing pitch, we're changing speed and speed alone. If I play back one of these lower notes too, you'll notice something really interesting right at the front of the sound. This almost kind of like rolling quality. That's because that attack portion of the piano is being stretched out across time. And so you're hearing that attack multiple times as the algorithm tries to kind of like stretch out an instantaneous event, or an almost instantaneous event, to make it take place over a longer period of time. With time stretching turned on, we can change the pitch independently by saying pitch shift cent. And then, similar to what we did with the slider over here to change the speed, now we can change the pitch. I could go, say, from minus 1200 up to 1200. The pitch shift in cents, the units of this are cents, meaning 100 cents for every half step. So an octave is going to be 1200 cents. Positive 1200 means go up an octave, minus 1200 means go down an octave. And with time stretching enabled, you can hear what that sounds like. With just these two things, I think we were already in a place where we can make some kind of fun and interesting sounds happen. I'm going to show you what I mean by that. So I'm just going to save this to a new folder called in-class OTI patch. I don't know. We'll call this patch 1, class 2. And now I'm going to make a new patch. And this patch is going to be we'll do some experiments with playlist tilde in this patch. So one thing in particular I think is really fun is if you take a sound that is not harmonic, does not have a musical instrument, well, not a pitched instrument quality to it. For example, I don't know, let's grab one of these EDM crashes, maybe EDM crash number 5. Sounds like a fun one. And then let's turn on time stretch, and let's make an easy DAC so we can listen to it. And let's have a little taste of this sound. Make sure our volume's down a little bit. Cool. But now let's grab a little chunk, and if you click and drag on the playlist object, you can actually change the region of the sound that will play back. And in particular, you can grab a little tiny region and turn on looping, and then start playing. And instead of you kind of get this sort of like texture. Instead of, you can hear a bit of looping, but it's almost sounds like it's just kind of the wind or rain or something. Not quite, but you'd have to, if you use your imagination a bit. So with this, I'm going to make a couple more sliders. And these sliders, I'm going to adjust, instead of being in the range 0 to 127, I'm going to put them in the range of 0 to 1. Actually, I'm going to do 1 and then copy it. So I just select this slider and open up the inspector. That's by clicking the I over here or pressing Command I. And then I'm interested in these values here, the float output and the range. I'm going to enable the float output and then change the range to 1. And if you compare this now to the slider that comes just when you make one, by pressing S or by typing slider into a new object box, my custom slider is going from 0 all the way up to 1 with all these nice in-between values included, whereas this one just goes from 0 to 127 with no integers only with no fractional components. So I'm going to make one of these sliders and then duplicate it. And then what will be a fun range for this playlist object? I want to change the speed and the pitch. So maybe let's say scale 0 to 1 to be in the range. What's a good range for speed? Maybe like 0.1 up to 4. And then for so this will be our speed. And over here, this will be our pitch shift. And we'll call this same input range, 0 to 1, but the output range maybe like minus 2400 to 2400. So up or down 2 octaves, pretty extreme pitch shifting. To make that do what we want, I'm going to do speed $1, just like this. And then actually something I forgot to mention is that way back when I talked about holding down Control to click on the input of an object like this and see the messages that the object receives, you'll also see all these other things up here. These are the attributes of the object. And this is what you can modify when you select the object and look at the inspector. Those attributes, especially if you click on the All tab to see literally everything, you can see here that turning on pitch correction, time stretching, all this stuff is available here in the inspector as attributes that you can modify. If you hold down Control and click on one of these, for example, pitch shift, you'll see a little object show up like this. This object is called Adder UI. I've heard people say a truey, but those people someone needs to sit them down and help them understand that there's a way we do things, there's a way they do things, and there's a right way to do things. So this represents just a row essentially in the inspector. If I select the Adder UI and if I select the playlist tilde and scroll down to the inspector, you'll see that there's a row here for pitch shifting and sense. Let me select pitch shifting and sense. And now if I change this entry in the Adder UI and look at the corresponding value in the playlist inspector, there's my new value. So this is essentially just like a window into one row of the inspector, which can be very handy. It's also handy because instead of using this $1 syntax, I can just connect my scale like this. And now as I move this slider up and down, you can see I'm changing the pitch shift of this Adder UI, of this playlist tilde object through the Adder UI. And with this, I feel like we've already got a kind of fun sound design toy here if I just hit play. The only kind of drag about this thing, I would say, wait, hold on, I'm going to take a sip of my beverage. The only thing about this, I would say, that is not very satisfying is that we have to use the mouse to play it, or we have to click, I should say, to play it. So what we can do is instead of that, we can use some input objects to control what's going on here. I can use, for example, the key object to detect key presses. Key just outputs a different number whenever you push a key on the keyboard. So I'm just pushing some keys and you can see what happens. The key that you press, the number that comes out does not necessarily correspond to if it's a numerical valued key, for example. I'm just on my MacBook here, so I don't have a row of number keys and a numpad, but they might be different when it comes out of the key object. Don't quote me on that. But certainly it's the case that if I push 1, for example, what comes out of key is not 1, but rather 49. Although mercifully the numbers are at least in order. So if I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, at least it's going from 49 up to 57. The letters are not like that. So if I hit A, that's 97. B, however, is 98. C is 99. Wait a minute, are they in order? Okay, I lied. They're in order. But they're not in order on the keyboard. They're in order alphabetically. Anyway, so key reports a key press. If I use this in conjunction with something like a cell object to select a particular number, we could do, say, cell 49 to select the key valued 1 on my keyboard. And if I connect that to a message box that contains a 1, telling the playlist tilde object to play, now I can press the 1 whenever I want this to start playing. If I wanted to stop playing, then I can listen to when I release the key, maybe with a key up object. So we'll do key up, also select for 49, and then just send this thing a 0 to stop playback. Okay, but we still have to adjust the speed and the pitch by clicking on these sliders, kind of a pain. There's an object we could use for this called mouse state. Mouse state gives you the state of the mouse. It reports whether the mouse is up or down, and also the position and screen coordinates of the mouse pointer from the second and third outlet. Now you'll notice this object doesn't actually do anything when you first create it, and that's because mouse state is like an on-demand object. It reports the state on demand. If I connect a bang to this and hit the bang, now you can actually see that mouse state is showing me where the mouse is. Of course, because I'm clicking this button, it's always in roughly the same place. You can also send mouse state the poll message, and once you do, it will start polling the internal state of the mouse, and you won't have to click it anymore. You won't have to send a bang to mouse state anymore to see the state of the mouse. And it will just output a number whenever the state of the mouse happens to change. So I can go all the way to the range of these numbers here are in screen coordinates, so it will depend on the size of your screen. If I go all the way to the left here and all the way to the right, you can see the size of my screen in pixels or something. It's 1728. From the top to the bottom is 0 to 1117. Your screen size will differ. Maybe it will differ, maybe with the same. But if you plug it into a projector or something, it can be different. So something to keep in mind. I can use these to change the speed and pitch shift values here if I like. So for example, I could do scale 0 to 1728 to be in the range 0 to 1 to go into my speed slider. Now notice that I'm scaling to the range, not to the range 0.1 to 4, but rather to this range 0 to 1. And in a minute, I think it'll be a little more obvious why, but the basic idea is that we could have multiple different kinds of input, and depending on where the input is, I want to scale, instead of scaling from each input to a particular range of outputs, I'm just going to take every different input, scale it to 0 to 1, and then scale that back up to where I want it to be. If later I decide, actually, I don't want to change, well, this will all make sense actually in a second when I show you how to connect a different kind of input. So maybe for now, we'll just scale it to be in that range 0 to 1 and go from there. So I connect this guy to here. Now you can see the slider is showing me where my mouse pointer is on screen. And if I do the same thing here, only go from 0 to 1117, now our pitch shift is also a function of the mouse. And if I start pressing 1, we've got a little noisemaker. And of course, we can duplicate this and start adding more layers. So I could just grab this whole stupid thing, duplicate it, and then change the key and key up here to be, say, 50 and 50. So now I'm selecting key number 2. And we find a different sample in here. Maybe instead of EDM crash, we find EDM, I don't know, one of these. Maybe I'll grab a snare. Oh, God, sorry, it's so loud. I'll grab this snare and then select a little region right here. And let's try this one. I got to hit pole on this mouse state. And just like that, we've got like a fun little sort of instrument. I will say, though, that it's a little bit, we don't necessarily need to have the mouse state object duplicated in both these places. It's not necessarily inefficient, but it's kind of annoying, especially that I have to remember to hit pole for every single one of these mouse state objects. Every time if I open this patch again, I mean, I could use a load bang object. So in fact, it might be a good idea to throw a load bang object in here so that the load bang object will send a bang. It's like a button that presses itself automatically when you open the patch. And we can use that to send this pull message as soon as we open the patch. But what I'm getting at is that this kind of thing, this little piece here, we don't really need to duplicate that over and over again. We could compute these scale values once and then send that to all the sounds that we want to hear. So what I'm going to do is actually take these patch chords and cut these and move this thing over here. And then I'm going to make some objects called send. I'm going to do send x and send y to send the x and y coordinates of the screen of the mouse pointer. And then I can make a receive x and a receive y over here, receive x, and a receive y. And now you can see it's as if these things are connected. So the send x and the receive x and the send y and the receive y effectively act like a connected patch cord, even though there's no physical connection there. This is not just, it's not like, a real patch cord would be more efficient or there's some kind of like overhead to doing this. It's really, feel free to use send and receives liberally as long as it's making your patches more readable and not less readable. So instead of having this whole mouse state thing duplicated down here, I could just grab this receive y and this receive x, copy them, bring them down here, get rid of all this, and connect the receive y to my sliders for speed and pitch shift. And now if I wanted to make another sample here to play with, it would be as simple as grabbing all this, duplicating it, picking a new key. So instead of 50, let's say 51, key number 3, grabbing a new sample, maybe, I don't know, this one, this one. And then You get the idea. You could have one of these for literally every key on the keyboard if you wanted to, and make a really dense recording. And in fact, that'd be something fun to try. So that's how you can use the key up, and mouse state objects to control something like this. Of course, that's not your only option. And in fact, I have a Gamepad controller right here, my PlayStation 5 controller. And brand new in Max 8.6 is this new Gamepad object that gives you very fast and very easy access to everything that's coming in, all the data coming in from this Gamepad controller. So if I option click on this to bring up the help menu, you can see also this handy UI that shows you everything that's coming in. You have two fingers tracked on the trackpad at once. You have XY controllers in these joysticks, continuous control on the right shoulder buttons and the triggers. Really just a lot of different stuff here to work with. And if you double click on this output messages subpatch, we haven't talked about subpatches yet, but essentially anytime you see an object here that starts with a P, it's basically an object within an object. If you double click on it, then you'll see a bunch of objects and some little inlets or outlets that let you, so this one here is an outlet that if I look back up at the parent, there's one outlet on that guy. So I know based on the fact that this starts with a P that if I double click on P output messages, I can see everything that's going on in this patch. And this is just here to show you how, what all the different values coming from the controller are named so that we can use them. So now what that means is that back out in my main patch, if I make a route, and this is the object that's doing the magic for us, is route is an object that lets you take messages coming in from one source and send them to multiple outlets depending on what those messages look like, essentially what word they start with. So if I do route north, south, if I send the message north 17, then you'll see that the rest of that message, the 17 part of it, gets routed out of the leftmost outlet because that's where the word north appears in the arguments to route. And if I send it a message like south -10, you'll see that -10 message goes out the middle outlet, which is because of where the south symbol appears in the arguments to route. And the last outlet of route is reserved for messages that don't match. And so if I send a message like East 99, you'll see that whole message, East 99, comes out of that rightmost outlet. This is actually super useful. So another way, if you didn't know what Gamepad natively, the messages that would come out of it, is you could hook up a print object and look at the output to Gamepad. And as you look in the console, you will quickly see that this very, very rapidly fills up with sensor gyro and sensor accel messages because the accelerometer and gyroscope are sending, who knows, maybe 100 a second, a lot of messages. But if I use a route object that says something like route sensor underscore gyro and sensor underscore accel, essentially this acts like a filter. So route can both select for messages that you want to see and filter for messages you don't want to see. And now if I connect a print object to the rightmost outlet of this route object, you'll see nothing is being printed until I say push a button or move a joystick, and now you see values just for those things that I actually care about. So right now what I care about is the triangle button and my left joystick. So if I hit triangle, I see button underscore Y. So I'll do route button underscore Y. If I move the left joystick, you see axis left X and axis left Y. So if I do route axis left X and axis left Y, now those are the values that I'm choosing out of my Gamepad, and you can see what those look like down here. So I'll make a toggle for the button because it's going to be 1 or 0, up or down, and then floating point boxes so we can look at the XY position of the Y joystick. But now, whenever I push the Y button, or the triangle button, you're seeing that toggle go, and when I move the left joystick, you're seeing those values appearing on the output of this route. And this is what I was talking about before about why it's useful to use to take these scale values and convert them into the range 0 to 1 before you send them to anything else like this. Because now what I can do is, the button values that are coming out of this left and Y, the X and Y here, these are in the range of they're in the range of -1 to 1. So they're not ready to be sent here yet. First I need to scale them. -1, 1 to be in the range 0 to 1. Same for this guy. And then we'll do send X and send Y. And now without moving the mouse, I can control these sliders by moving the joystick around. And this is why I say that it was convenient to first scale things to be in the range 0 to 1, because now these two different input sources can both send inputs to the same values here, using the same range, 0 to 1, even though they input at different ranges. So the input here is 0 to 1728, the input here is -1 to 1, but they both output in the range 0 to 1, and so they can both be connected immediately to this guy here that actually controls things. If I want to play my samples now I need to do a little bit of thinking to figure out how I'm going to connect my gamepad over to these samples over here. I could do something like, send S1 for different samples. So we could have send S1, send S2, send S3, and then we would need receive. And by the way, receive and send can be abbreviated to just R. R and S. Definitely saves on a lot of typing and a lot of space too when you've got a lot of send and receives going in one patch. But with the receive S1, receive S2, receive S3 in place, now I can take the output of this route, and if I do button, let's say button X and button A, and then I got to move these patch cords over and make a couple more toggles. Now I can control each of my samples using a different button on my gamepad here. So let's try that. I accidentally hit oh my God, I accidentally opened. It looks like I'm going to be, looks like I got to play a game of chess. Oh well, guess that's happening now. But how do I quit Game Center? Why can't I quit you, Game Center? Okay, there we go. Never accidentally push the PlayStation button on your controller in the middle of a live performance. That would be embarrassing. So yeah, this is how you could connect both the mouse state and the gamepad to a really, really simple example of how just with a couple of small things that you can control, speed and pitch shift in this sense, and controlling the playback of some samples, you can make some fun sounds. So there's one more thing I want to show, so let me save this as patch 02. There's one more thing that I want to show that kind of builds on something we looked at last week, specifically using metro and counter to control the speed. To control the way that sounds play back. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a few different samples and then connect them to the key buttons on my keyboard so I can play them back. So let's just grab some basic drum kit type stuff. I'll get a snare, I'll get a kick, I'll get a hi-hat, and I'll get a clap. This one. And let's just map these. So let's do key, and let's do cell 49, 50, 51, 52, and then make some message boxes to play these back. Okay, and now I'll make an easy DAC to listen to the output and a live.gain to control the volume level. And let's connect this. Little tip here, if you hold down Shift and click on an inlet or an outlet and start dragging a connection, then if you keep holding Shift when you make the connection, you'll start making a new connection right away, which is really handy if you want to connect a bunch of things to a single point like this. And I'll do the same thing for the right channel. Okay, and now that should be all we need for me to hit these keys and hear some drum sounds. Might be a little bit loud. Oh, sorry. Anyway, so the thing that I want to show you here is how we can manipulate time, specifically adding a little bit of quantization so that we essentially can't play these events off the beat. So that we're always, no matter how we play this thing, we're always playing on the beat, which could actually be like a fun way to either do some finger drumming or arrive at some rhythms that you might find kind of interesting. So what I'm going to do is chuck in a metro, similar to what we were looking at last week. And now think about it this way. Right now, when I hit one of the keys on this keyboard, this 1 goes through. So I push 1, a 49 comes out of key, cell selects it, sends a bang out of this outlet. It triggers this message box to send a 1 to this playlist tilde that then plays back the sound. What if when I hit the key, instead of sending a message right away, instead I just store that message and hold on to it, and then wait until the next beat, and when I get to the next beat, then I play the sound. If we do that, then it would become impossible to play the note off beat, and essentially you'd always be quantized to exactly the metrical grid. Now I can do that by using an I object, and this is essentially just a register storage for a single number. And if you connect something to the right inlet, you can put something in there, and then when you send a bang to the left inlet, you will output whatever happened to be in there. And what I'm going to do is use this as a register going into a trigger object. And this is the clever trick that kind of well, I don't know if it's clever. This is the trick that makes it all work, is this T0I. So what this is trigger 0I. T is short for trigger in the same way that R is short for receive and S is short for send. If I send a number into this trigger 0I, you'll see what happens is that that number goes in straight, so the number comes in, say 71, and trigger fans it to each of the outputs, potentially with some formatting. So the characters I for integer, S for symbol, F for float, L for list, anything else for anything else. So what I mean by that is if you use anything else, the value that comes in is essentially overridden by the value that's there in trigger. So you'll notice that no matter what number I send in to trigger, a 0 is always coming out of this outlet. However, it is still, you can see that it is actually coming out because that 0 is triggering this button. So even though this number box isn't displaying, the number's not changing, but we can see because this button is illuminating that something is coming out of there. And actually, I realized that this might look a little cleaner if instead of doing T0I, we do TI0, but it doesn't actually matter. All I'm going to do is take the output of this thing and connect it back up here to this register. So now, whenever we get a bang in here, we send that number through, but then we reset the storage. So the storage goes back to 0. And that way, what happens now is, if I turn this metro on, you hear nothing. Because a 0 is always coming out. The bangs are coming out of this metro for sure, but every time they do, they're hitting this integer box, and just a 0 is coming out. And 0 to a playlist object means stop playback. But then as soon as I send a 1 into this register, on the next beat, this event starts playing. And I'm seeing now that actually I don't really like this because I don't want to stop playback. I don't want these zeros to get through. So I'm just going to put it's interesting. I can use a cell 0 here. And if I'm careful and connect the right outlet and not the left outlet here, then instead of selecting zeros, what this essentially does is filter zeros. So the only thing that will get through is something that is not 0. In this case, the 1 that I'm interested in. Now I can take these patch chords, delete them, and just duplicate this little structure here. And after connecting everything up, but I connected something incorrectly. This should be connected. They're all incorrectly connected. These should all be connected to the blue inlet here, the cold inlet. And then I'll connect this metro to everything else. I should mention this hot and cold inlet outlet thing. You may notice that some inlets are hot. They have a sort of salmon pink colored color. And the some inlets are cold. They have this blue sort of coloring on them. If you look at the eye object, for example, you'll see that whenever it receives a value in its right inlet, it just goes straight through. So it's actually changing the internal storage of this register and then also sending that value through. However, if I send a value into the left inlet, then nothing happens here until I send a bang to this object, and then that value actually goes through. So many objects work this way. A lot of the math objects work this way. Many objects have this behavior where only some inlets will actually cause an output. Those will have that hot color, and then those that don't cause an output but change the state of the object somehow will have the cool mint color. Or it's not really mint. I guess it could be a spearmint. But spearmint's not really that color. That's just the color of products labeled spearmint. There's a philosophical discussion to have here. Now is neither the time nor the place. But I will finish connecting these objects, and now we can hear some finger drumming. I think it's actually kind of a fun way to generate sort of semi-rhythmical patterns and to explore different possibilities beat-wise. But the effect is even stronger if you chuck in maybe like a quiet kind of hi-hat. Let's find a quiet one. That one's kind of quiet. So I have to unlock, and then this is the one I want. If you just play this one on every beat, then you will really quickly hear, you'll really quickly hear this thing playing on beat. Anyway, you get the idea. So this is a combination of Metro, some new concepts with the playlist object. And so one more thing I wanted to say about this. Simply that one more. So we've talked about route, cell, aka select, T, aka trigger, all really important, useful objects for like routing messages around and getting messages to go where you want them. One more that's useful is gate. Gate essentially lets you turn a signal. It's like turning a spigot. You could turn the signal on or off. And in fact, if you give gate an argument like 5, for example, then by using this left inlet, you can control which of these many outlets the right input goes to. But I'm just going to put a gate in here, coming from the metro here that is that like click track, the continuous events, because maybe I want that to stop once in a while. So I'm just going to do key 32. I'll use the space bar. Key doesn't work this way. I always forget that key does not work that way. You have to make a key and then a cell 32. But I'll just use this into a toggle to turn this gate on or off. So if I start playback now, you don't hear anything. If I push the space bar, that's just turning this gate on so that you can so that events that come in here will actually come out here. And there's an object too called Gate that's a graphical version of this gate object. And if you connect this, you can actually see what it's doing in terms of how it's routing the input to one or more outputs. Okay, so this is the other patch that I wanted to show you. And that's really the material that we were able to cover this week in class with respect to playlist tilde and controlling playback playlist tilde objects. I did assign some homework in class, but then I regretted it. And instead, I want everyone to focus on their in-class crypt presentations. And there's a link to, well, I gave out a link for that material, or rather that assignment in class, and I'll post that with a description of this video as well. So unless there's something that I'm forgetting, but I don't think I am, thanks again for coming along to this second class. I hope it was enjoyable, and I will see you guys in class number 3. All right, take care. Have a good week.